Hi everybody, I'm back here today for video 3 in our anxiety series. Today I'm talking specifically about what happens in kids in terms of anxiety. How do they develop anxiety? What are the reasons? And there's a whole range of factors that lead to anxiety that is way beyond genetics. Most people want to say that anxiety, depression, except many other emotional problems are derived because of genetics. But it's good for all of us to know that genetics is just one part of the puzzle. Just like any illness that can be inherited, emotional problems also, or even disorders, can be inherited genetically, but they only come into fruition based on environmental factors. So something has to happen for those genes or the DNA to activate itself, for anxiety to develop into children, to manifest itself. So today we're talking about in detail the factors that contribute to anxiety in children. It's very common in children to have anxiety, especially in today's world of chaos and stress. And anxiety can begin as early as 2 years or even before that. And if you want to know more about what is anxiety, what is separation anxiety in a 2-year-old, etc., just see the videos below that I've shared, video of number 1 of the series, video number 2 of the series. It's important for you to get that foundation to understand the series that we're building up on. So let's talk about all the factors that can cause anxiety in children. It can be very shocking for people who don't know this to know that contribution to anxiety can come since before the child was born. So the mother's body, how the mother's body is wired biologically, emotionally, in terms of what is ingested, the health of the mother, overall emotional health of the mother, smoking, drugs, the amount of chemicals, processed foods. That's why doctors over here, in today's world, will specify that 6 months before you want to conceive, you want to start clearing your body of pills and chemicals and processed food, etc., or even habits like smoking and drinking, because that has a direct effect on the child's, not only the physical development of the child later on, but also emotional development of the child. So literally contribution to anxiety, if a child is developing anxiety at 10 years of age, it could have come from part of it at least, or maybe a large extent based on what kind of habits and the physical and emotional state of the mother was, can come from even before conception. Then of course the state of the mother since conception, during the entire pregnancy, and the birthing process of the child. Birthing is it can be such a traumatic experience, especially in C-sections when kids are pulled out from their feet, in breech babies, even in natural normal births. There's a lot of trauma physically also that can directly affect the neural connections, the neurological setup of a child, that can influence, have a later on effect on emotional health of a child. And there are going to be, when I talk about techniques and solutions, I am going to talk about how all of that, or a large chunk of that, can be reversed. So anxiety is something that can be very pronounced and can look like it's taken over somebody's life, and it feels like, it's so larger than life, but it's very, very possible for us to manage anxiety, reduce it, and even completely relieve a person of anxiety. So, but let's just focus on the important factors right now. So besides birthing, after birthing, the emotional state of the mother, especially if the mother was breastfeeding, so the emotions of the mother, the state of the mother is immediately passed on to the child, and even just the vibrations of the mother and the overall home environment. So how does an infant feel in terms of feeling secure, feeling loved and cared for? Even though consciously, their conscious mind cannot process that, they're taking in the vibrations, they're understanding that pattern of I am receiving love, I'm feeling secure, that later on develops in the sense of security as the child grows. So what was the environment of the child after birth, the mother's emotional health, physical health after birth, especially if there was lactation, etc., and then environment of the home as the child continues to grow. So if there is emotional chaos or even physical chaos in the home, and by physical chaos I mean a couple of things. It can be too many people in the home, having too many siblings, just too many family members, constant, like just a crowd or a constant flow of people in and out, or lack of routine and organization in the home, lack of physical organization. So if there's no proper routine to a home, but also if there is, let's say that there is routine, the child can predict what is going to come in the day, how my day begins, when my day ends, when am I going to eat. It's very important to have that predictable routine in a child's life. So let's say that was there, but if the home environment was very cluttered, disorganized, frazzled, if people in the home were frazzled, that can contribute to anxiety as well. So there is a tendency to anxiety. You can say that it's come in the genes, but it's important again for you to know, I want to emphasize that anxiety just doesn't happen because somebody has it in the genes. That's a very passive way to approach it. That's a way to say that, I can't control it. And many people like to go by that because that takes away the responsibility of having to deal with it. But that doesn't help us. And there is plenty and plenty of coping strategies and resolutions and lovely case examples that I can give you, including my own life. I had generalized anxiety disorder, not disorder, but generalized anxiety, where until I came to the United States and I learned how to manage my anxiety and why I was an anxious individual, that I was able to completely shift my life. So it's absolutely possible to deal with anxiety and make a 360-degree shift. So besides, let's come back to the factors. So besides the home environment, and let's say all of that is great. Besides that, even traumatic events that can happen in a child's life. Now know that even infants can go through trauma. Now let's say the mother had postpartum depression, and that can contribute to trauma, emotional trauma to a child. Or there was just discord, emotional crisis in the home, physical crisis, financial crisis in the home. There can be trauma that can come to very little kids through separation. Like how was separation handled is very important. Separation anxiety can have a lasting impact. And you may say that I don't even remember it, or the mother may say, how does that even matter? We may not remember it, but everything is stored in our subconscious mind, and we build patterns since we are very little about how we are going to cope to life situations and survive. And if anxiety was one of the coping strategies the child had to come up with because of the trauma that happened when there was separation from the mother or the caregiver, and there can be so many scenarios that I don't want to go into all of those details. But one example is, let's say your child was not ready to go to school or a daycare, and the child was left there, and the child howled and screamed for more than 20 minutes. It's considered, then that's trauma to the child. The child is not healthy. Coping is within 15 to 20 minutes, the child learns that my mom is going to come back or my caregiver is going to come back for me, and they adapt to the surrounding, or they sit silently, but they're not internally frazzled and they're not howling and screaming in pain. So if that continued to happen and caregivers still continued to they had to for whatever reason, then that can be trauma that is seated in the subconscious mind and manifests itself as anxiety later. But there can be other traumatic events like actual real physical accidents, emotional events, arguing parents, divorce, death, loss of a pet. There's so many reasons that trauma can happen, that it can be first-hand trauma to the child, like separation from a parent through divorce, for example. Or it can be second-hand trauma where the parent is going through trauma, or family members at home are going through major distress or sudden life changes, moving of a home, a new sibling coming into the child's life. All of those are major life-changing events that can contribute to anxiety in children, which can later on manifest. And later on you might think of what has happened in my life lately, but we can go back to the seed, the roots, and connect the dots and say anxiety was slowly building up in this person, and it was just like a silent seed, a silent snake that was never detected. So that's another reason, and we will talk about how to deal with all of that and even reverse these effects. Then another very, very important reason, part of my life example that I can give you is, of course, I had a major life-changing event. My mom died when I was 6. It was a major, like suddenly security, emotional care, everything, my whole world had shifted. But I'm also an empath. So anxiety, children who are highly empathic or HSPs, like I am a highly sensitive person. That's a personality type. And over 15% of the population, and even more and more in today's world, given the spiritual and shift that the earth is going through, more and more HSPs are being born in the world. So HSPs are typically, in very general short, I can say that can be indigo children, rainbow children, children that are born from other planets, that are spiritually very, very wired. But in the human world, they don't fit in at all. And they have this ability to sense other people's emotions. They're just highly deep empaths or telepaths or all of that. And they have a tendency to anxiety because it's actually not quite anxiety. It's only because that they're so attuned to vibrations from even outside of Earth that they're constantly absorbing vibes and vibrations and thoughts and things, seeing things and feeling things that are not apparent to the human existence. But they don't even know that. And that leads to a sense of like heightened state of worry and overwhelm. And can manifest as anxiety, can be detected as anxiety by a psychologist, when actually all the person needs to do is teach them to be attuned to their empathic nature and utilize that. So that was my journey. You know, I've always been an HSP. I've never known it. I didn't know the term until I came to the United States and what that is, but I knew that I was an empath, but it was never accepted. It was never accepted. I was a telepath. I could read people's thoughts. I can still do that from like miles and miles away since I was little, and nobody would believe me. And so I had to keep shunning my intuition. And then slowly, when you suppress emotions, it turns into anxiety. So that's the smallest and the quickest description I can give you, because I don't want to go into like make this a very long video. So personality type can contribute a huge deal to anxiety, and there's nothing wrong, I want you to know. When your children are anxious or they're empaths, don't try to change that. It's not wrong. In fact, use it to your benefit. You know, it's amazing to have a child who is so spiritually wired or emotionally wired, because we need healers in today's world, and not everybody has that ability. So, and that's a whole different topic, but we can talk about sensitive children and how to, that's a whole different series we can do. And then interactions with the world. How are other adults treating them? Are they feeling safe in school? Are they feeling safe overall? Have they had negative experiences with adults? Even something like negative experiences like, you know, sexual assault, or even like touch that was negative for children. And you might think that it may have happened to you and it's not that common, but ask a life coach or a counselor like me and other life coaches. We are constantly getting women and cases, and even boys in today's world, that are, I think every third child in the world has experienced some kind of sexual harm before they're 18. And I even hear of cases when they were 6 and they were 8, and it just stayed with them. They never shared it with their parents, or their parents didn't believe it, or if they knew, they didn't know how to heal it. It's possible to completely heal all of that, but that again can contribute to anxiety. Also ingestion of what kind of food are they ingesting? You know, what kind of food are they eating? Because and this is not coming from, I do have my own beliefs, but this is coming very purely from a scientific point of view, that when we have dairy and meat and etc., the way it's processed in countries like the United States, we are taking in vibrations of that animal, we're taking in the antibiotics and the other ways in which the animal has been cut, killed, processed, and it's going into our system. Everything that the animal ate and thought, and all those vibrations are going into our bodies. So everything that we're ingesting through all of our senses, so things that we hear and see in the news around us, things that we feel and we touch, other people's touch, things that we are ingesting through food in our bodies, all of that is having an impact in today's world. And in today's world, we're globally so open in terms of social media, Facebook, we're so connected that we're constantly inputting energy in us. And a lot of it is very, very negative, and that is one of the reasons why there's so much anxiety in younger ages already now. That's one of the big reasons. There's a lot of thought pollution, there's a lot of noise and pollution around us constantly, right? Physical pollution, emotional pollution. And so our coping strategies also is going to be a huge list. But understanding the root cause is always my way of teaching and guiding people, that if you understand the root cause, then you're able to attack the actual problem. You're actually able to heal what's needed, do what's needed to be done to deroot it once and for all and sustain that state, instead of just trying different strategies or going on to pills that will only suppress. And then you have to stay dependent on it, dependent on those pills, which is not a healthy way to deal with anxiety, and it's not required, because anxiety is an emotional problem. Depression is also an emotional problem. It cannot be resolved with medication. It's an emotional problem. You cannot physically change it, but you can suppress it. It's sort of like giving somebody antibiotics when they have a cold. It's not going to remove the congestion from the lungs, but it's only going to suppress the symptoms. And that's exactly what antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, etc. do. Now, in some cases where people are suffering, let's say, with very, very severe emotional problems like personality disorders, emotional disorders, or generalized anxiety disorder, medications may be very, very important to sustain their day-to-day functioning. So I'm not saying that don't take medications ever, and there's no generalized rule to it. But if it's just a general, if it's not a very, then that has to be detected and tested and diagnosed professionally, formally, etc. So be discreet in using information, but understand the concept is what I'm wanting you to say, is it's possible to manage anxiety in children as long as it's not coexisting with other major disorders or emotional problems. So this was my video to tell you, to help share what are the causes, how anxiety is created, why it's created. I want to do a whole different video on what are the coping strategies. And again, I'll try to break it down to keep the video shorter, because there's so many coping strategies. There are amazing ones that we can give our children that are just beyond, it's not only about just meditating. Many people can't meditate because their mind is so full of thoughts that anxiety has built up to a point where now that silence is not possible. So what do you do in that scenario? How do you deal with that is what I want to give you. Authentic, organic, real solutions to your day-to-day emotional problems that you can share with people in your life, apply in your own life, even share with your kids. This is coming from my own life experience. I have a child who's highly sensitive, who has basic anxiety, but that's again a part of just being the HSP and the empath, and the world doesn't quite understand that. So this is coming from direct experience from me, beyond my education as a psychologist and a life coach. So thank you for listening to me. This is Rima Desai from The Guiding Star. We are going to continue talking about our anxiety series and lots more to come. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.